Let's go to someone who is good at his job. Me. Mike McAllister joins us. Mike, how are you?
I'm good. I thought you were going to interview yourself for a minute.
I was.
I don't need to do the show tomorrow, Mike. I'm off the hook.
Mike, just where are you as a person who covers Syracuse and follows them basketball wise? Where are you right now?
I'm at I'll give this as the example. Since I've been covering, and even before I've been covering Syracuse, growing up in the area, whenever I had a chance to go to a game, basketball, football, lacrosse, anything, I was excited to go to a sporting event, go to the Dome and watch a game. And it's the first time where I'm not for basketball. And, I'll give my son as an example as well, in that he last year was begging me to go to basketball games all season. This season, he's been begging me to go to football games. And he hasn't mentioned basketball once. And I think that's kind of where a lot of the fan base is that it's not just that they're losing and they have a bad record, but they just don't enjoy watching them. And, the Dome's not as filled. The record's not what people expect. And
do you think it's that way, Mike, because you don't have a guy to JJ's the local kid, and,
yep.
But you don't have a guy that you can, center around. Like, you would think it would be JJ, but, like, look at what the football team did. They were out in the community anytime that you saw them, doing charitable events, doing things like that. Like, you rarely ever see that from kind of the SU basketball team during the season. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get that. I do think they do probably more than what is.
Yeah, what we see.
Yeah, than what we see. It's maybe not as public. Could they do a better job of that? Sure. I think maybe that would help with some of the struggles, as far as getting support. But even with that, the fact that the football team was out in the community, all that stuff is great, but if they weren't winning,
you're right.
Would that have resulted in the same level of support? I don't think that's really what's driving it. I think it's winning. This is a town that will get behind a winner and will support them, and will travel and all those things when they have a team that they think is really good and has a chance to compete. And when they don't, those things don't happen. So right now the fan base doesn't think that they do. And that's kind of where we're at. There's anger, there's apathy, there's kind of everything in between. Because I think part of it was that there were expectations this was going to be a tournament team this year, and they're far from as we currently stand.
You say that we thought they were going to be a tournament team. When you're the guy that goes in depth on these guys, the guys they got out of the portal. How many of them are guys that now that you're looking, you were good gets out of the portal?
Yeah, I mean, most of the guys they got out of the portal had other power conference teams after them. For whatever reason, it just hasn't worked. It hasn't worked as far as being cohesive. Now, I do think that not having JJ for an extended period of time for 7 games really hurt them, because I think there were 2 or 3 games in that mix that they would have won with him. Georgetown, Notre Dame, Wake Forest. I think they win those 3 games with him. And if you have a in rhythm, fully healthy JJ, do they pull out that win against Florida State? Does that game go different? Because he was obviously showing some signs of rust. That wasn't, the full JJ like we saw against Texas and Texas Tech. So I wonder, if they have him for the full season, is their record different? Are they 3 or 4 games better than what they are right now? I think they might be. I certainly saw some signs against Florida State that they looked better than what they had in previous games with him out there. And it gives Red a lot more versatility in terms of what he can do with his lineups and his rotations. But listen, ultimately, regardless of who's injured and who's not, you got to win. And when you don't, it can't look as uncompetitive as it has in some of these power conference teams. They're 0-8 against power conference teams. I mean, that's really where the season is at right now.
I mean, not only 0-8, how many times over these last 2 years have we seen this basketball team just, get blown out? And that's, the frustrating part. Like, you really never saw Syracuse basketball teams getting blown out the way they have. Like, what do you make of, moving Chris Bell to the bench and starting Lucas Taylor?
Well, it worked. I mean, Chris Bell came out and had, I think, the best game he's had all season, at least in terms of shooting the ball. Syracuse needs him. Red made a comment after the game that said if this thing is going to get turned around, Chris Bell's going to be a big part of that. And I think he's dead on with that. That if they're going to turn this around and at least be a respectable basketball team the rest of the year, then part of that turnaround is going to be Chris Bell at least shooting the ball the way he did last year. And I think we saw some positive signs of that against Florida State. I didn't see any forced shots from him. He took some good shots and made an impact on that end of the floor. But I think they need more from Eddie Lampkin. He only played 18 minutes, and when he was out there, didn't have a huge impact. Part of that could have been a matchup thing, but they certainly need more from him. And if Lucas Taylor is going to continue to shoot the ball well from the outside as well, that I think moving him into the starting lineup, whether it's him or Bell, but kind of splitting those guys, maybe playing them together at certain points, it certainly will help Syracuse space the floor a little bit if those guys are both shooting the ball well for the rest of the season.
I got a question for you, Mike, and I don't know if you can even answer it. It's preseason, the media had Syracuse picked 11th in the ACC. What made the Syracuse fan base set its expectations so high, and what did the media see that maybe the fan base didn't? What do you think causes that?
Well, I think the media sees the fact that Syracuse hadn't been to the tournament in several years, that they had losing seasons pretty recently. Last year, they got to 20 wins, but I think most thought that their conference schedule was on the easier side from what a lot of teams had to face. And so maybe they thought there was a little bit of fool's gold in last year. That's just my guess. I don't know. I'm just kind of guessing on that. But that combined with losing your best player in Judah Mintz, and maybe they didn't think as highly of some of the incoming transfers as what some of us did. And I think they saw the potential to really struggle defensively, and that's come to fruition. Eddie Lampkin's a really good offensive big, but has never been considered, a great defender. And that's kind of played out so far this season. They haven't had much in terms of rim protection, and that certainly hurt them. And then, defensively around the perimeter, they've struggled at times as well. So, it's just one of those things where they were right and we were all wrong. Now, on the flip side of it, the media was pretty wrong about what Syracuse football was going to be, and the local fans were pretty right about what they could be. So, it kind of ebbs and flows. Sometimes they're right and sometimes they're not.
Well, let's flip to football.
I'm always right. Just thought I'd share that.
Yeah, he's Mr. Positive, too. I don't know how he was left off the old Whites region for that bracket flying around, but that's neither here nor there. Looking at football, can you nail down a definitive time when Kyle has to make a decision? And going from there, where does Syracuse, what's left to look at in the portal?
My understanding as far as Kyle goes is that February 7th is the last day to pull out of the NFL draft. So theoretically, he can file the paperwork that he needs to file to, be part of the NFL draft process. But by February 7th is when he kind of needs to pull his name out if he's really intent on returning. If he's planning on staying, then he doesn't need to do anything. He just stays and he's good. But I think February 7th is the deadline for withdrawing from the NFL draft. So that's kind of the date to monitor. And the NCAA is really good at delaying things and not caring about what certain deadlines are. So are they going to try to make sure that they make that decision in time for, Kyle to have all of his options on the table and decide what he wants to do? You'd like to say yes, but history says the NCAA is not going to care about that, and they're going to take their sweet time on things. As far as what's left in the portal, I think based on who they've targeted and where the offers have gone, they're looking for at least one linebacker, a pass rusher, and a safety. Those seem to be the three areas that they're really recruiting hard. Now, I think they could grab another offensive lineman. They could grab another defensive lineman, an interior defensive lineman. But specifically, it seems like trying to find a pass rusher that can replace Fidel Diggs, trying to find a linebacker that can replace what you're losing in terms of experience and leadership with Marlowe Wax and Justin Barron gone, and then finding a safety to replace the experience and leadership of an Elijah Clark. I think those are kind of the areas that they're most focused on based on who they've targeted and are trying to get on campus to visit.
Were you shocked at all of LeQuint going?
Not shocked. I had heard, kind of rumors most of the season that this was a strong possibility. He's kind of in a situation where I feel like I'm not sure if he's going to get drafted, but I'm not sure if him coming back and having another strong season, because let's face it, 2 years in a row he's had good statistical seasons.
Yeah, I mean, a great statistical season. He had 500 yards receiving and 64 receptions and 1,000 yards rushing. Right.
I know. He was, I think, one of only 4 FBS running backs to ever do that in the history of college football or something like that. He was only one of 2 running backs in college football this season to have 1,000 rushing and 500 receiving. And he had 20 touchdowns in total. So, I mean, statistically, you can't really argue anything against what he's done. So hopefully he gets a shot, whether it's as an undrafted free agent or, a late-round draft pick or something like that. But ultimately, if he comes back and has another strong statistical year, I'm not sure how much that would really up his draft stock. And so he's had a ton of carries the last 2 years. Shelf life for running backs are short. And so it makes sense why he'd want to turn pro now and try to get those miles on his body as a professional as opposed to a collegiate player.
What do you make, but before we let you go here, Final Four of the college football playoff, who you got?
I'm a little surprised that the only SEC team that's in the Final Four is actually a Big 12 team.
It's not an SEC team.
Right, it's not really an SEC team. And so I do find it funny that even after that Final Four was set, Lane Kiffin is still out on the podium talking about it's just different in the SEC. It's just different. And yet the only SEC team that made the Final Four is a Big 12 team. So I think those words kind of ring hollow, especially when you have, multiple SEC teams losing to what are considered comparable teams in the Big 10 and the Big 12, et cetera, in bowl games. But ultimately, I think Texas is probably the best team, but that game against Ohio State might be the determining who the national champ is, because I think those 2 teams are playing the best. I think Notre Dame is right after them, and then I would rank Penn State 4th. But I can see a scenario where any of the 4 win it. I just trust the other teams and the other coaches a little bit more than I do with Penn State.
Yeah, I said whoever won that Ohio State-Oregon game, and I thought Oregon was the best team in the country with their speed and everything, but Ohio State took it to them, and now they got Texas and Notre Dame, Penn State, so should be a good Final Four. Mike, as always, thanks for your time, buddy, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
That's Mike McAllister.